listening is not sufficient, and replaying the tape is not sufficient. It is understanding that is sufficient. So, what is understanding? Let's take, your analogy of music is nice, but let's take the telling of a joke, because it's clearer. When you hear a joke, I'm a useless storyteller, so I'm not even going to try and tell you a joke now. But when a good storyteller tells a joke, they eke the joke out for as long as possible. And as the joke is being told, the mind is wound up into a state of tension, always anticipating that. And a good storyteller will make us feel that we're about to be relieved of the tension, only to take off again, and never quite let us. Exactly the same with a Bach sonata. Just feel the piece of music is going to be resolved, and off he goes again in a different key. So in this way, the mind is led on a journey and is wound up with this, in this state of anticipation, which is tension. Now, when the storyteller, with the very last word of the joke, we understand the joke and we burst out laughing. Now, when did the experience of understanding take place?
At the punchline, at the end
No,
of the...
After the punchline. You had to hear it. Sometimes even, if you don't get the joke immediately, there can be a pause. The joke has come to an end. The laughter has not yet begun. The joke is a movement of the mind, a movement of thought. The laughter is a movement of mind, it is a vibration of the body. So between these two movements of mind, what takes place? Understanding. So understanding takes place in between these two expressions of mind. It takes place in the absence of mind. Mind, in this case, we mean absence of the objective element of mind. It doesn't take place in thought. It takes place in the gap between thoughts. Now, when a thought dissolves, going back to our meditation this morning, when the objective element of mind dissolves, what remains?
The experience.
Just knowing.
Just knowing.
It's the screen between two frames of a movie. When the thought disappears, the knowing out of which it was made doesn't disappear. So when a thought disappears, all that disappears is a coloring of consciousness, or an activity of consciousness ceases, leaving pure consciousness. That is the experience of understanding. Consciousness is no longer coloring itself in the form of thought. The color dissolves, and consciousness knows itself, its own uncolored self. That is the experience of understanding, consciousness knowing its own being. Isn't the experience of understanding always the same experience? You're at an evening. It's the last evening of a treat. We're having our celebration evening. Everyone is telling jokes. And after each punchline, there is that pause. We get the joke, and then we laugh. But is in between the end of the joke and the beginning of the laughter, in that transparent, empty, non-objective experience that we call understanding, is it not always the same understanding? Because that understanding has no objective qualities. It has nothing to distinguish it from the understanding that takes place after the next joke. It's always the same experience. Whether we understand that 2 + 2 = 4, or whether we understand a joke, or whatever we understand, understanding itself is always the same experience. Consciousness knowing its own infinite being. In other words, consciousness ceasing to limit itself in the form of mind, ceasing to color itself with its own activity. And for a timeless moment, timeless because no thought is there, timeless moment, it shines in its own in its own experience of itself. It tastes itself again, it recognizes itself. And then that recognition is so liberating that the whole body is flooded with light for a moment, and that is expressed as laughter, which is this release of tension.
And at that moment, there is no memory.
No, understanding cannot be remembered. You can remember a series of thoughts, but understanding cannot be remembered. No matter how many times you go back and listen to the tapes, you will never be able to remember understanding.
Exactly.
You can learn the words off by heart, but that is not understanding. But once we have understood something, the understanding is never put in from the outside. It was always our own. It was always in us. So the understanding is, there's no question of forgetting the understanding, because it wasn't something we acquired in the first place. So all that is being done here is the mind is being washed clean of the colors with which it seems to be limited. So that the mind itself, mind with a capital M, pure mind, the original mind, the essential, irreducible, indestructible nature of the mind is being allowed to shine through all its temporary modulations. So we're drawing attention again and again to this irreducible, indestructible nature of mind with a capital M, pure consciousness. And that is the experience of understanding. In relation to our thoughts, we call that experience understanding. Exactly the same experience, the same transparent, non-objective experience in relation to our feelings is called happiness. And in relation to our perceptions, the same experience is called beauty. So truth, love, and beauty are all the same experience, consciousness knowing itself as it is. But the reason they're given 3 different names is because the experience has been arrived at through 3 different portals: thinking, feeling, and perceiving, the 3 realms of experience.